welcome or welcome back to TSC Talks, the podcast where we talk about Tuberous Sclerosis Complex and other related conditions such as intellectual and developmental disabilities and autism. Inspired by the condition Tuberous Sclerosis Complex, TSC Talks is creating special needs audio, visual, and written content designed to facilitate communication, collaboration, and affect societal change. That is the new tagline. Once again, this podcast is sponsored by Nikki's Gardens of Hope, building permanent residences for adults with intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, and autism. I'd like to thank them for their sponsorship, and you can check out more about the awesome programs and projects at nikkisgardensofhope.com. So today we are on part 2 with Alexis Minnaar. We're going to continue our in-depth conversation about living with TSC, her personal experience. She talks in this episode in detail about stigma, relationships, the state of care for TSC in South Africa, the impact and the impressions left on her by getting together with other families that was set up by Professor de Vries, who many of you know as the TAND expert. He coined the TAND acronym for TSC associated neuropsychiatric disorders. He's a phenom in the TSC world. Alexis talks about him. She talks about her desire to help others in her country and around the world with the condition, growing up with it, knowing that it's manageable, acceptance, kind of knowing how to set limits, like we discussed in the last episode. Is it worth drinking? Is it worth too much caffeine to have a seizure? You can't just go bungee jumping because everyone else is doing it. Just making these decisions along the way to preserve a quality of life that is sustainable. I really appreciate her honesty, her powerful advocacy, and willingness to step out of her comfort zone, share from her heart like all of you do, and thanks for listening and tuning in. I'm going to stop talking. I do want to share, coming up on the podcast, I have a law enforcement officer, Ricardo Gomez, who shared a Facebook post about his son with autism, who was involved in a law enforcement conflict that escalated beyond belief. He's here to discuss that. And I also have a cannabis expert coming up after that, Mike Robinson. He is going to discuss his experience with his stepdaughter treating her epilepsy and autism with cannabis. So those are 2 things on the docket. But without further ado, again, I'm going to say thanks, Alexis, and take it away. So relationships, you're married? And
yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm getting all the pieces here of the puzzle. Not that it's a puzzle, it's a beautiful panorama, seriously. So you went through college, you're working, and you're blogging, and so I guess I'm going to go back. And so high school, you were homeschooled. So how were interactions with other people, your social life? Kind of bring me along with that.
Oh, absolutely. With homeschooling in South Africa, especially such a early stage in homeschooling where it was kind of sort of illegal and we weren't actually supposed to be doing it, a lot of moms go into this. It's super funny, sorry, but I'll explain why now. They go into this mode where they're like, I have to homeschool my child, but what about socializing? And they freak out. And what they do is they then form these massive social groups.
Oh, really?
Like ice skating, yeah. Or going to the park for a picnic or something, and you meet 50 to 100 kids all at once. Boom.
Really?
Yeah, because everyone's worried about socializing. So they just throw you in this park with hundreds of strange kids, socialize, do your thing. You need to learn these skills.
Right. You got to check this off.
Yeah. So we were constantly meeting new people all the time. And that helps with meeting people with autism or meeting people with ADHD and how does your mom teach you? What curriculum do you use? And what books do you like to read? Twins meeting triplets, meeting a family that's only boys or a family that's only girls, and you kind of stand back going, wow, that's weird, like as a kid, just because you're like, I am the older sister with two brothers, so at least there's some balance in gender. Imagine living in a house with just girls. Like, that must be chaotic, and you start talking to different people and making new friends. And we only got cell phones from a much older age.
Uh-huh.
So you write letters to these people, and there you develop writing skills. And it's funny because every homeschooling mom is worried about socializing, but the irony is that you meet people all the time because of it. And so, if you didn't want to join that group, you could always join that group, and it was fun. But at the same time, living with TSC, it's a very obvious difference. So, every person I met, everybody, I'm not over exaggerating, I'm telling you the truth. Everybody. Why do you have a red face?
Really?
Why is your face lumpy? Yep, everybody. Because it was so obvious.
Uh-huh.
And then they would go up to my brothers and be like, yo, dude, your sister's so weird. I mean, she's got like this red face. Is she sunburned? And then my brothers couldn't answer those questions. So I would have to come over and be like, no, I'm not sunburned. I was born with it. So that was my go-to response, and it actually still is, if I'm very honest, is that it's kind of just ingrained. It's an automatic response where somebody goes, oh gosh, what happened to your face? I was born with it. And then they go, oh, so it's not the sun, or it's not acne. Nope.
And it shuts it right down.
Yeah, it shuts it right down,
Yep.
And
puts it back on them.
Yeah. So that was interesting, and to watch my brothers grow up with that makes you feel a bit guilty as the person with TSC.
Yeah,
but
how many layers of guilt are there? A lot.
Oh, there's quite a few, yeah. They kind of just pile up on top of each other. But it didn't affect their relationships too much. My brothers' relationships. It just really affected mine. So I would have to choose my friends very carefully. People who didn't mind that I had a red face and would still play with me, whereas you get the other group who would go, oh my gosh, it's cooties, and then run away. And you're like, okay, whatever. I'm going to go play with that group who doesn't mind that I have TSC or that I have freckles. And so there was a lot of that right up until matric.
That's tough.
Yeah, it is. And I got to a point when I was 15 where I was like, I try so hard to maintain these friendships with certain groups of people, but what am I really getting out of this?
Right.
Like, it's a two-way street. So am I begging to be your friend and you're just tolerating me? Or are we actually friends? And that's when I realized that, okay, I really have one true friend that has stuck by me, and she's not homeschooled. She has led a very normal life, but she stuck by me nonetheless. And so I kind of decided that, maybe to let those old friends go and just focus on that one friendship. And funny enough, that's when I met my husband.
Really? You kind of just let go.
I kind of just let go, and I was like, well, if you don't
I only need one friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that's one thing that's, is friendships and keeping up with people when it's just really becomes exhausting. So. Yeah.
So I went to go write my matric, and I decided that I just didn't want to be around so many people, and I sat down alone on a hill, and my husband and his two friends greeted me, and I was like, oh, this is weird. Nobody's ever come to me for friendship before. This is really strange. Please don't rob me. It was like one of
right.
Like unsure situations, and we clicked, and so yeah, that was fantastic. But again, with Christian, I sat him down when he asked me to date him, and I said to him, look, dude, this is what you're dealing with. I have epilepsy, I have TSC, which means that the chances of me having children are very slim because it's actually quite dangerous. Are you willing to put up with that? And I burst
Wow.
into tears. Like I couldn't even get the words out, and I just broke because it was difficult for me to say, look, you're going to lose certain aspects of your life if you date me.
Mm-hmm.
And he burst out laughing, and I was so offended because I was crying and I was pouring my heart out to him, and he laughed.
That sounds like something my partner would do. Like you get twisted up, and then what's the big deal?
Yeah,
Really,
but
that's
exactly what he said. He said, what's the big deal? You know, if you can't have kids, we'll adopt kids. But I like you, and you know, I want to be with you. So that was like the best thing that's ever happened to me. Like, if I'm very honest.
Well, you deserve it. Yeah. Yeah.
The reason why that meant so much to me was because the previous boyfriend before him, we had gone on about 2 dates, and my mom sat me down and she said, Alex, you need to kind of tell this guy what he's getting himself into.
I was going to ask you about that because my daughter recently asked me. She hasn't had, a lot of relationships. At what point in the relationship do I mention that? So this is good stuff.
Yeah. So with that, it was quite a shock because we had gone out and everything was fine, and he didn't mind my red face and, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom said, okay, you have to tell him if you're planning to go into this and be serious. And so I sat him down and I told him, and all of a sudden he disappeared. Like, okay, not literally, but like, when he went home, he just vanished. Like, I couldn't get hold of him. Mm. He didn't tell me which part of the story he wasn't happy with. He didn't tell me, he didn't say goodbye, none of that. Mm-hmm. It was just poof.
Wow.
And that was an eye-opener and a half. So when I met Christian, I was like, I'm not risking it.
Yeah.
I'm not risking getting to know you, and then all of a sudden you ghost on me. So here's everything up front, plain and simple. If you don't like it, get out. If you do like it, I'm happy to stay.
Yeah, that's really probably the best, laying your cards on the table from the get-go. It takes some balls, though, I'd say.
It does. It's very difficult. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
But it becomes more easy with time. So friends that Christian and I have made together, usually that's my introduction. I'm getting good at it. So I'll say, hi, I'm Alexis Minnaar. And then as the evening progresses and they start asking more questions, then I'll say to them, so say they ask why your face is red, because that still comes up. And then I'll say, I have TSC, which is a genetic disorder and has caused me to have epilepsy and these angiofibromas on my face. And a lot of people are accepting, oh my gosh, you're epileptic? Really? How's that? And they forget all about the TSC and the fact that your face is red. And they just start focusing on, you're epileptic, must be difficult. Do you drive? Do you drink? Do you do this? Do you do that? And then you get to know them more because, they're asking questions, and then you get to ask them personal questions like, do you drive? Oh, how long have you been driving for?
Yeah, give it right back to them.
I know it sounds a little bit ridiculous, but, it becomes a two-way.
Yeah, that's a nice description of a way in with the, epilepsy, I guess, is pretty well known now, and it's not as scary as it used to be, I think. Everybody knows somebody that's had a seizure or something, so. And that's probably, the biggest thing that you'd have to.
The thing is that since we've met a handful of people, I have met more people with epilepsy than I ever did growing up. Because once you share your story, then people are like, oh, it's a safe environment. Okay, you know what? I also have epilepsy, but it's not temporal lobe, it's frontal lobe, and this is how I deal with it. And it's not always connected to TSC, but you have a common ground, something that you can talk about, something that you can share. And it takes a few people a little bit longer to share than others. But, nonetheless, the more you talk about it, the more comfortable they become. And
it's so important.
Yeah, that was very special to me when people started opening up, because for a long time you feel like you're alone in this, especially with the TSC. And last year, one of our South Africa's main researchers, Professor de Vries,
Oh yeah,
did a do you know him?
he's the he's like the god.
Yes.
I'd love to get him on the podcast.
Oh,
But
yeah,
he has done more for tan behaviors in the U.S. than I think anybody, getting that as a manifestation of TSC. Let me tell you, I mean, there's still a lot of resistance and people don't get it yet. But just to have that language and what he's done is, yeah, he's very well respected.
Man. Yeah.
So, okay. So, yeah. Okay.
When I started my research, I read as many of his articles as I could get a hold of. But last year, he did a Indaba for families in South Africa with TSC. And I said to my friend, I have to get there.
Oh, I was reading about that in your blog. Yeah.
And I completely went fangirl over him. Like, I didn't mean to, but I did. And
a lot of people do. I was like, wait a minute, buddy. I think you're awesome, but I want you to come spend 2 weeks living in my house, and then you can tell me how to manage this.
Yeah.
Because I was in the middle of a bunch of really crazy stuff when I went to a conference. But no, full respect to him and his work. So yeah,
but he
went
amazing.
Fangirl.
I did, and he had about, I don't remember how many of us there were. There were about 7 families at this Indaba, and to sit there and hear their stories was breathtaking. I cannot explain the feeling that I had. It wasn't just that it was Professor de Vries. It was, there are people in my country with the same condition as me. This is amazing.
Who initiated that? Forgive me.
No, it's okay. Professor de Vries initiated it because he was doing research on how to help families in South Africa with TSC. And his sister, Maxine, helped him to arrange everything. So I worked a lot through her. Yeah, and there was another doctor, and then the founder for the Red Cross Foundation was also there. And they all did very small, very quick talks, and then got all the families to share their stories. And that was breathtaking.
I can imagine. When
you're, I was 24 when I went to the Indaba, and for 24 years I have spent not meeting a single person with TSC except for a 10-year-old girl.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then to go and to meet these families where one family has a 15-month-old baby and they're worried because they don't know if they'll be able to take care of her, and another family who has an 11-year-old who's only just found out that he has TSC and it's changed his entire life, obviously. And then to meet another family where there's a 26-year-old girl, but she's still living at home and her parents are really worried about her. It's really, really eye-opening. So that was the most amazing experience I have ever had, to know that, hey, you're not alone in this. The scary part for me is that it took me 24 years to find these people.
That's very scary.
There are 59 million people in South Africa. So where is everybody else, and where are they going for their support? That's my question. Because there cannot only be 7 families in South Africa with TSC. I don't believe that at all.
No. It sounds like a huge area where global outreach is needed. You know. Yeah, I don't know if you know who Dr. Teal is. She's our pediatric neurologist, but she is pretty well known and a leptologist. But she was telling me how she went to China and worked with with a doctor there treating TSC patients, and just the need is overwhelming. Like, she saw 60 people in one day in a city. So yeah, just what you're doing now and your blog and talking about it, and what Dr. de Vries did is so important. And I think for my kids, it was part of it was such a sense of relief to find other families. So I can relate to that, and hoping that they are going to be able to tap a network of people. Now, they haven't yet, but they're young.
No.
It takes
Yeah.
time for the acceptance, I believe, I think everybody comes at it differently. I guess that's the way it works. But what you're just your level of comfort with talking about some tough stuff and, being bullied and getting this perspective is great. So yeah, there needs to be more awareness in South Africa. And
Definitely.
yeah. And as I think one thing that I like to pull out of this is just the tools that you've developed personally, and that's really important for this population, young adults, to know what other people do to manage it, because I think that there's so much fear that it just can make things worse. So yeah, I will definitely take the note of the resources that you use with the puzzles and the journals, and yeah, so that's part of your vision, and you're doing a blog, and there's no TS Alliance clinics anywhere in South Africa that you know about, because I don't think so. Okay.
No, there is what they do something along the lines of the TSC Alliance has something like South Africa Day or
Okay.
TSC in South Africa Day or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
but there are no physical clinics or support groups or anything like that in South Africa where people can go and say, listen, I need emotional support or financial support or that sort of thing. It's really very much crawling in the dark and kind of like feeling your way around until you find someone.
Yeah. That's really too bad. And it seems like you have had some fortunate experiences as far as having a mother and family who was aware and tapped into a lot of connection and got you that, you have good treatment. So speaking, how important it is, I guess is what I'm stammering around. Yeah. I mean, I think that just being on the podcast and letting the TS Alliance know of the need globally in South Africa is a big step. So I'll hook you up with that.
That would be amazing. I would love that. I have a TSC Alliance profile on Team Inspire, I think.
You do? Okay.
Is that what it's called? And I read up every now and then, but I've only seen one post by a South African, besides myself, on there.
There's a couple groups that you could join. There's one for behaviors that I don't know, but yeah, there's a lot of active Facebook groups. I know there's the moms, and there's the behavior one, and then there's the TS Alliance discussion group. I don't know, but your voice and, I think speaking up as an adult, living with it and what you've used to cope, following those boards, I think, might get the attention of more people that, I guess I can't promise anything, but I'll do what I can to connect you with.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jill.
Oh, absolutely. And what's your vision? I mean, what is in the future do you career-wise and hobby?
My vision in terms of TSC has a very sad start, but anyway. I was working in the Montessori environment the one day, and a mom came in with a child with epilepsy, and she said to my senior, will you take in my child? And he turned around and he said, oh, no, sorry, we don't cater for children with epilepsy, but there's a special needs school nearby that you can send him to. And this upset me tremendously, but just bear in mind I was 19 at the time and really didn't have a foot to stand on. But it upset me for two reasons. One, the Montessori curriculum was designed by Maria Montessori, who was an Italian philosopher, educational philosopher, who designed it to help kids in Italy with epilepsy, autism,
no way.
any other difficulties that she had noticed. And the problem was that the adult community where she was staying were illiterate and therefore couldn't teach their own children. So she developed this system to help these kids. So for a Montessori school to turn away an epileptic child and say, sorry, we don't cater for you, really, really upset me.
Yeah.
And then secondly, after that, I started doing research of where TSC kids, like autistic and epileptic kids, actually go to school. And in South Africa, unfortunately, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but in South Africa, they often get sent to special needs schools where they are
dumbed down.
Yeah, treated like they're stupid.
Yeah.
And I've got nothing against special needs schools. They are necessary for a certain group of kids. But just because you have TSC does not mean you're one of them. And it does depend on the severity of the TSC. I will acknowledge that. But again, it's not all TSC kids. So
right.
My vision...
Better solutions and more individualized educational models.
Exactly. So my vision is to, within at least 10 years from now, open my own Montessori school who caters specifically for kids with TSC, whether you are autistic or epileptic, functional or non-functional.
And like bring in the medical part too to support the...
Yeah, bring in the medical staff, the psychological staff for parental support, as well as support of older children with TSC, and just have that educational foundation there. Because as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, if my mother had not sent me to a Montessori school where I was catered for, I would have struggled with many more cognitive delays than what I did, because the Montessori system allows for repetition as many times as you require it. It's not this hour we are doing reading and writing and this hour we are doing maths, and if you skip one, you fall behind. It's repeated until you get it right. Repeated until you've mastered it, and then we will move on to something more advanced. And that is what is amazing for me. So
that's perfect for repetition is so needed.
Yeah. And so, and in South Africa, we do have a bit of a sticky situation when it comes to education. We have very broad extremes, and not all parents can afford to homeschool their kids, because it usually takes 2 salaries just to keep your family afloat.
Yeah.
Especially if you have more than one child. So I'm aiming to, or my goal is to provide that space for both parents and children where they can come and say, okay, my child needs to be educated, but so do I. And I don't want to leave my child alone with you, so may I sit in and watch how you teach my child so that I can do it at home, or, may I sit... Exactly. And having access to information for parents to reading material where they have, like, TAND. They can read about TAND and say, okay, my child's struggling in these areas. Who can I contact? What medical staff can I contact? And just having a network that's easily available. And yes, that's the perfect word. Thank you. I've been looking for the word and I just couldn't find it. I want to start a hub specifically designed for parents and families with TSC and caretakers, if parents, not parents,
Right.
But that sort of thing. And I know it seems a bit ambitious, and I am aware of that.
Well, no, not at all.
Not
at all. It's not ambitious at all. In fact, the company I'm working with is developing that type of a program, but more for intellectual disabilities, not necessarily TSC. I kind of wish that she would, because she has a son with TSC, and this will have to be cut out, that she would go the more TSC focused, but her son's severely impacted, and but she's also, extending it to milder forms of IDD, but also having employment on site and work therapy and, all the wraparound parts that can help people kind of move forward and not, and, have like a life of meaning and dignity. So that's, so, I think it's not that ambitious. It should happen. I mean, I think for me, TSC, it's just becoming so obvious that of the gaps it's like made to make everyone aware of all the gaps in the medicals in all of our systems, because it affects so many different aspects of your life, I think.
No, absolutely.
So I think the hub idea is brilliant. And I think that, I love it. I'm so happy to hear that. It's just wonderful. So, yeah.
Well, just for the listeners, if you don't mind me sharing something else.
No, please, go.
What I found, and I shared this with my brother as well, is that a lot of parents go to a doctor and that doctor tells you your child has TSC. And statistically, your child will not be able to walk, talk, feed themselves, because that is what statistics say. And I find that very few parents after that will go for a second opinion or will try to overcome the pointed out difficulties that they may encounter. So they end up accepting that they're going to have a child who is incapable of looking after themselves, and therefore don't bother trying to teach them how to. If that makes sense?
Yes, it does.
And there was a story that my mother shared with me, and it goes like this. There was a brain surgeon who got sick, and he couldn't decide what was wrong with him, so he did an MRI on himself. And when the results came back, he discovered that he only had half a brain. And the moral of the story is that had he known as a child that he only had half a brain, do you think he would have become a brain surgeon?
Probably not.
But exactly. So it's just these little things that we indirectly allow to hold us back, instead of just trying to work with what we're given and do our best with what we have. And, even if a child doesn't pass matric but becomes a beautician instead, at least they're still able to take care of themselves, do basic math, have a family, have a normal life. And I'm honestly not discrediting people who have absolute severe conditions.
No, I don't. Yeah, no, I know.
But I am saying that as small as it is, there's always that little slither of hope.
Absolutely. I think that is what drives maybe your own mother and my I know. I just think that we limit ourselves in so many ways. We limit what can happen and also getting the second opinion is really important. Not accepting the doctor's answer if you are not quite sure. I think that I've found that at this point in certain areas, particularly with behaviors and the mental health system and the social services in the U.S., the doctors don't know really what is going on. There's just the people that are living with it and the people that are managing the care, whoever it is, they know a lot. So, I think you are an expert in a lot of ways. I mean, what goes on behind the scenes and how many people are turned away. And, TSC is tough because it is so comprehensive that I think there's a lot of fear. We don't want to touch that, especially the piece. So I don't know. You can't give up. You got to hold on to the hope and just keep moving forward. I guess that
is absolutely true.
I was going to say one more thing. I know before we had the podcast, we talked, I think that there is also something that I've realized is that the finding of the cure is really important, but so is the here and now. And, you're here and accept it. We don't want to always think of it as like a disease type thing. Of course you have to go see doctors and whatnot, but the aspect of neurodiversity and, I see such real strengths in my TSC affected the people that I've met, like incredible gifts and whatnot. Maybe that's placating, but I think that just really quality of life issues and are really important too. So.
Oh yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, the cure is important, but it's only one side of the coin. You know,
It really
the
is.
here and now, the people who do have the condition, and you're right, it should not be viewed as a disease. Because I feel like the term disease implies that it's contagious. And
Yeah.
then it misleads people to think that, oh my gosh, if I go near her, you know, I'm going to get it. And that is one thing that it's the way children see things, which is what made making friends so difficult, is that they go, is it contagious? Is it like the flu? Like, if I'm your friend, am I going to get it? And it's difficult for a child to explain, no. It's genetic. It's a condition. It is something I was born with, the same way I have brown hair and brown eyes.
Exactly.
And so I think, as important as the cure is, we need to focus on the children, the adults, the people who are discovering now that they've had the condition all along. It was just dormant and something's now triggered it.
Mm-hmm.
That to help them cope and manage their lives currently without getting their hopes up about something that may only be discovered in 10 years or 50 years.
Right. We're going to be here a while, so let's make it better.
Yeah, let's help you now. How can I help you with your education now? How can I provide a cheaper, more sustainable diet for you now? Not every TSC sufferer needs to go on the keto diet. You might need to go on the Atkins diet or the modified diet, and those are still not cheap, you know. So where can we work with producers or malls or shops to make you getting your food source more sustainable,
more accessible, more affordable?
Yeah. Where can I take you to socialize that's safe? Like, for example, I have so many of my high school kids. I mean, I love them to bits, but they make me laugh. Where they'll say to me, Alex, do you go clubbing? So I'm like, no. Why not? Because there's more than likely strobes, and that's dangerous for me, you know. And so they'll say, well, why don't you just ask them to switch it off? And I'm like, well, because I don't know, I'm the only epileptic in the whole club of 120 people, and you want me to go to the DJ and switch off the strobes? I mean, it's a bit unrealistic. So, you know, so where can we, and I'm not encouraging clubbing, but
no. You know, where can we make a middle ground for this?
Yeah, let's provide you with a middle ground where you can still be a teenager and satisfy that curiosity.
Preach
you're
it.
Safe, you know. And if you have a seizure, your friends are not just going to leave you there. I have heard so many stories of epileptics going out with their friends because they're teenagers and they just want to enjoy life, you know, and they have a seizure, and all of a sudden their friends leave them there on the floor.
Oh boy.
And go somewhere else. And then I've got my high school student coming up to me going, Alex, I found a girl who had a seizure on the floor in the club. What was I supposed to do? Because she woke up, but her friends were gone. And I didn't know what to do. And then I have to say to them, you know, well, the most important thing is that you make sure she's breathing and that she's not choking on anything, like her own vomit. And that nobody's put anything in her mouth, you know, because people do that.
Yeah.
And, you know,
let's put awareness.
Awareness is so important. And educating, like, what really weighs heavily on my heart is educating teenagers on how to manage their TSC, because all they want to do is have a normal teenage life, you know, go to the movies, go to clubs, have fun, and then they end up getting in trouble. And I'm not saying that they can't do all those things, but they need to be aware of the consequences of their actions. So if I do A, the consequence will be B, and is it worth it? Is it worth drinking and giving myself alcohol poisoning and possibly going into stasis in a hospital? You know, is it worth it? And I was trying to share this with a friend And she seemed to understand, but she got frustrated with me because she kept saying, Alex, life can't stop. You can't stop living because you're epileptic. And I said to her, I understand that, but you have to live smart. You can't just go bungee jumping because everybody else is going bungee jumping. It will overstimulate your brain. You'll end up having a seizure going halfway down. And then what? You're dangling from a rope, upside down no less. And there's no one there to help you.
Thanks for that visual.
So I don't know. That's something that
that's so well said
on me at the moment because I work with teenagers. Yeah. The other thing is I have a child in school who is epileptic and bipolar, but she refuses to take her medication because she's convinced her father's trying to control her. So
I've seen variations of almost everything that you've mentioned. Either I've heard of it or in my children. So I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that thing of, it's not about control. I just want you to be safe and to be seizure free. It's not about, I'm trying to treat you like a robot. I'm trying to medicate obedience out of you. It's not that. It's, you need to be safe.
So how do we make a better, because I know sometimes I think in my daughter's case where she's struggling with drinking, she's had taken pills her whole life. She's always kind of had to live with a lot of people telling her what to do and how to do it. And how can we make better options for, like you said, socializing and the middle ground? Because you have to take on some premature responsibility in some ways. Like, you can't do what everybody else does. And I think that you can, but it's just terrifying, I think. I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is what are your thoughts on teaching someone that, like you're talking about, that wants to, that can't quite understand, be able to control it?
Sure, I'm not a parent, so I can't really answer from a parent's perspective.
What got through to you?
What got through to me, I think, was the idea that you can have fun, but in moderation. So I was a rebellious child. When I went out with a certain friend of mine, we would steal champagne from her father's bar because he always had it stocked. But I never had more than one glass. And I drink it exceptionally slowly. You can ask my husband. We'll start the wedding with a glass of champagne and I will end the wedding with the same glass of champagne because I'm savoring it, because I know I'm not going to get it anytime soon. And B, I'm cautious. So you can have it, but in moderation. So as long as my glass is at least half full, I know nobody's going to ask me to refill it. It's just
that makes sense. That's a good
coping, like a defense mechanism.
Right.
And so that's one example. And then
that's good.
As a teenager, we used to go ice skating, and they did have strobes. And I had to ask once for them to switch it off. And it was the weirdest conversation I've ever had. I'm telling you right now, the DJ looked at me like, are you being serious? It's a foam shower thing on the ice rink and you want me to switch the lights off? So he said to me, what if I just slow them down? So they had 30-second or 60-second gaps between the next flash. Uh-huh. And then I said to him, okay, that's a fair compromise. But after about 15 minutes, I myself had to remove myself from the situation. So I went and I stood outside for a few minutes, or my friend and I went to go get coffee, and then we came back when it was finished. And as fun as it was, it had to be cut short. Mm-hmm. So, you just have to make these compromises. Unfortunately, with the coffee thing, as I mentioned earlier, I will not make compromises. I had to quit that completely.
Really?
Because it's easy to go over just one cup. I have permission from a neurologist saying you are allowed one cup of coffee. You don't have to stop completely. But with my personality, unfortunately, and my work environment, where hot beverages are offered all the time, I had to say, no, zero.
Yeah.
I can't take that risk. Yeah, with regards to medication, I think for one thing, you get parents who are afraid of medicine.
Yeah.
And from a very early age, children can pick that up. And then they become irrationally afraid of their epileptic medication. I don't really know how to explain it, because with my parents, they told me I could overdose, but they didn't tell me what would happen if I did. So it was that like little, I wonder.
Do you know what overdose meant?
Yeah, because they would explain it. So they would say you're not allowed more medication than what's in your little container, because it's too much and it will be bad for you. But then what I did was, out of rebellion, I did the opposite. Where my friend is diabetic, not epileptic, but we basically went through this phase where we were rebellious, and I stopped taking my meds. And I didn't tell my father, because I had the tray. I have a month's supply of medication that I used to keep in my room. And like I said, I had alarms to tell me when to take it. So my parents didn't find out until 2 weeks later, when they walked into my room and my tray was still full. And they had to sit me down and say, Alex, you are doing permanent damage to your brain by not taking this medication. This is not good. And then Caitlin's parents obviously had to sit her down and say, you are doing permanent damage by not taking your insulin. You know, this is not good. And we both got lectured, because obviously we were in cahoots. And so we both got sat down and we compared notes afterwards, like, how cross was your dad? Oh, well, my dad was really cross with me, you know.
Yeah, you just want to put your middle finger up sometime. I mean,
But it's that frustration of always being told what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And
you
that was
that for the rest of your life. There's got to be one way or the other, not both.
Yeah. So my parents did give me the independence by allowing me to have the tray in my room. After I stopped taking my medicine for 2 weeks, they removed the tray, and they would then give me my medication and watch me drink it for a good while after that, because obviously, you know, it's important. But I think children should be, obviously not from too young, but it should be clarified at least that medication is not a bad thing. We're not trying to control you. We're not trying to take your freedoms away. We're just trying to make sure your brain doesn't shut down and reboot. You know, we don't want that. That's not a good thing.
So better ways of
communicating. There needs to be better approaches, You can't be a drill sergeant, but you also can't be a hippie about it. Like, you can't be too laid back. Like, no, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just...
No, I was real laid back. Like, my kids had their meds, but it wasn't always on the same time. And, you know, I had to get really regimented.
Yeah, you have to find that balance between being strict, educating your child, and still just ensuring that they actually do as they're told, you know. And I will confess, I haven't made it easy for my father. I completely acted out when I was 18.
But here you are now talking about it.
No, like, I came back eventually. But I'm sure it felt like ages for my father, because I completely acted out when I was 18, and I demanded my independence, and I refused to be told what to do, and I made life purposefully difficult for him by fighting with my mother. And eventually he had to sit me down and say, Alex, listen, at the end of the day, if I have to choose between you and your mom, I'm going to choose your mom. So you need to decide what you want to do. And, you know, I had to then consider exactly how I would cope with life and with independence if I had to leave my father's house at 18. You know, how would I was working, but would I be able to afford rent and transport and food and toiletries and, you know, or would it just be easier to cooperate and start small, you know, just pay for my own clothes or just pay for my own groceries, like one step at a time. I will confess that I did take the high road and I made life very difficult for myself. But, by the time I was married, I went up to my father and I was like, you know what? I actually appreciate everything you've done for me, and I'm sorry I made life hard for you. Thank you for being there, because he really has been a pillar of strength for me, especially because growing up, my mom was my mom and my teacher. So I didn't want to, this sounds really strange. I didn't want her to be my advisor as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like if I was having boy trouble, I didn't want to go to my teacher and be like, hey, mom, this guy's giving me a hard time. What do I do? So instead, I went to my dad.
I think that's...
I'm having issues here. And so I managed to just, it was a thing about independence, and it was a thing about being told what to do by the same person the whole time. And I don't really know how to explain it. I'm not encouraging rebellion, but it was a phase that I went through, a phase that I had to learn from. Well, and when my father said, if it comes down to you and your mom, I'm choosing your mom, then I realized that my parents have a united front, and that no matter what nonsense I gave them, nothing would change that. And I had to go off and find myself, find my own 2 feet, my own coping mechanisms, my own way to deal with my TSC. And I was in a lot of denial at the time. Why is this happening to me? Why am I struggling so much? And it was actually my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, who said, love, you need to look at everything you've accomplished. You need to look at the bright side of things. You passed matric when your pediatric neurologist didn't think you would. You have passed college. You are working. You are breathing. You haven't died in your sleep yet. And, you start listing things that seem arbitrary to other people, but are actually really important to someone living with TSC. You haven't. I do know.
You have to. Yeah. You have to grab onto that.
You do. And when he pointed those out, I went, wow, I'm actually quite privileged. And then I realized how spoiled I actually was, because of, I'm not joking. My parents have they provided so much for me. And they protected me from so many things and so many dangers. And I only realized that,
I think going through that and owning your independence and knowing what you need to do, personally is ideal.
It was. It helped me to just make that transition from child to adult. Because at that point in life, I even said to my mom, look, I don't want you coming to my neurology appointments with me anymore. I want to do it myself. Mm-hmm. And that hurt her. And I only know that because my father said, Alex, you have hurt your mother. Like, why did you do that? And I just said to him, Dad, I need to find my feet in society. Mm-hmm. I can't rely on you guys all the time. I need to be able to explain my condition to other people. I need to be able to understand what my doctor is telling me without it being watered down for my comprehension. I need to be able to book my own scans. I need to be responsible for attending my own scans. I need to be able to read my own scans, because one day when I'm 35, you're not going to be there to tell me that little speck on my MRI scan is a tumor. It's...
Right. And, I think you're hitting on, I think our parents we spend a lot of time case managing and keeping our children safe, alive. And we invest so much of ourselves when they go and someone else starts doing it, or whatever that letting go process is. It's hard because your identity is wrapped up in it in some ways.
Yes.
I've had to deal with some of that. I don't have this. This is their journey. I've got to give them the tools. And how do we do that? And
that's the thing.
Does it matter that I invested all these years of my life understanding this condition? How can I make it purposeful for me without it being this it's this ego battle and I'm holding up the process of them leaving home?
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Whatever way. Yeah, I think that you are hitting a very common, you do get really absorbed in it, and it's parents
But it does. It takes up your entire life. I mean, as a parent, what I've realized by talking to people, especially at that Indaba, was that as a parent of a child with TSC, you're constantly worried because you have this chance where you could lose your child at any given moment. When they're 2 and they have a 75% boost of hormones, you could lose them. When they're 14 and they go through puberty and they have another 75% boost of hormones, you could lose them. Even when they're 21 and they have run the risk of developing tubers on their lungs that could cause permanent damage. Yeah, you could lose them. It's this constant battle that takes up your entire life. It takes up all your mental and emotional energy. And as a child, we have to understand and respect that. I didn't. I'm being very honest. I didn't, because I just thought, I felt guilty. And because I felt guilty, I acted out by demanding independence.
It's completely, I think, understandable, and I think it's part of everybody's process.
Yeah.
I do.
But that's another podcast. Obviously, we'll discuss that further.
Good one, though.
As I said, awesome. For me, it's the education part where you can, your parents are not trying to control you with meds. You have to understand that is a health thing for you to survive.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a normal teenager. You just need to make different or wise or alternative choices.
Alternative, wise, middle ground, yeah.
And as a group, as the TSC Alliance and TAND and all these groups, I think we need to try and come together.
Absolutely.
And put up a system that educates teenagers particularly on their condition. And as well as parents, where you say your child's not in primary school anymore, they are trying to find their own identity. Here is how you can help them. Give them these alternative, safe options, but don't control their every move.
We need a curriculum. We need a curriculum.
Yeah, we need a curriculum.
And be taught and transferable. I mean, there's such a variability, as you know, with TSC, but I think that there's enough people that, are transitioning. That's a big part of parents, stressors too, because it's extended, beyond the typical launching period for a lot of kids. And I think, an education system for. Yeah,
I honestly feel that is what we currently need right now.
I agree.
Yeah, that's what's been on my mind lately. And to explain it to someone who doesn't have epilepsy or autism or TSC is difficult. Like my friend, for example, has led a relatively normal life, and she feels like I'm trying to stop people from living theirs. I'm not. You just have to live cautiously. And that doesn't mean you can't go skydiving or bungee jumping, but you have to know your limits. I know I cannot do that.
Right.
My seizures are caused from emotional stress. So as soon as I feel overwhelmed, anxious, afraid, even too excited. Do you know how stressed I was that I was going to have a seizure on my wedding day?
Oh my goodness.
I even went to my neurologist and I said to her, Dr. T, I need help. Am I going to have a seizure standing in front of these people while I'm saying my wedding vows? And she was like, Alex, relax, you'll be fine. And you know what? My hairdresser actually said I was the most relaxed bride she's ever done hair for, because I was so self-conscious about this. So I was like, you have to remain calm. You can't let anything get to you today. It was just one of those things.
You powered through it.
Yeah, but you have to.
You have to.
And that's just a silly example. So when I have a group of friends and they say, Alex, we're going whitewater kayaking. Are you coming? I'm like, no, friendo. Yeah. I'll make the sandwiches and I'll set up the
back
picnic
on the shore.
Yeah, I'll wait for you on shore and I will take photos, but I'm not getting in that boat.
Right.
Thank you so much for your time. This was awesome.
Loved it. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.